Hey guys, welcome to the Pen Habit. My name's Matt and I am glad to have you back for another fountain pen review. So in today's review, we're going to be taking a look at another pen from the North Carolina-based retailer Franklin-Christoph. So if you've watched a lot of my reviews in the past, you'll know that I have reviewed a couple of Franklin-Christoph pens, the Model 19 and the Model 2, both of which I liked quite a bit. One of them so much so that it led me to break into song. And so today I thought I would take a look at the Model 66 or the Stabilis. I don't know exactly how that's pronounced, but Stabilis. This is an unusual pen. It's a desk pen, so it doesn't have a clip. It's longer than you might expect. It's not a pen you generally want to stick in your pocket. It's got a bit of an unusual shape, and we'll get to that in a second. It is also made out of a fairly unusual material. This pen, and I'll show you in a second, is made out of an acrylic that Franklin-Christoph has named antique glass. Now, colloquially, in the fountain pen community, it has been called a Coke bottle glass or a Coke bottle pen because it's got that kind of bluish tint that makes it look like an old-fashioned Coke bottle. Obviously, for copyright and trademark reasons, they can't call it that, so it's antique glass. So let's dive in. Pen comes in a little box like this, white plastic box, and of note. Over the last year or two, Franklin-Christoph has reduced the size of its packaging a fair bit. They used to send their pens in clamshell cases. These days they've cut down on that and instead are providing, and I'll show you here, these really lovely little leather pouches. Little zippered pouches. I actually like this a lot. So this is always a really big thing in the fountain pen community, packaging. People talk about, well, what do I do with the boxes? Or I just throw the boxes away, or so many of the boxes are so normal, they're not worth keeping around. But if you get a really nice pen, the box it comes in may be huge and special and fancy, and you don't really want to throw that away. And would you rather have a pen that's cheaper than the pen at the price it is with a really fancy box? And so it's always an interesting thing. I keep all of my boxes because I think it makes the pen easier to sell in the future if I decide I want to sell it. But I really, really like selling these pens and sending them in leather pouches. I think that's a really cool way of handling this. So there you go. Anyway, leather pouch has the little Franklin-Christoph logo, like Celtic knot logo embossed on the front there. Take it out, and this is the Model 66. This is the full-size 66, and as you can tell, it is made of a very clear, with only a slight greenish tint, acrylic. It's a really neat material and a neat treatment to the material. So you can see down here it's polished all the way clear. Inside there's kind of a marbled texture that I don't know exactly. I think it's a chemical treatment that gives that finish on the inside. I don't know that for sure. But it gives you that kind of mottled antique glass finish, which I like a lot. Let's kind of go through the overview here. So the pen, flattish top, kind of tapers down. It's got this very long shape here. Short cap though, it's not a long cap. So the cap is only this much of the pen, which is kind of interesting. And we'll get to that in a second. And then again tapers down to a very flattened point here. Nice clear material, beautifully polished. The exterior of the pen has a flat spot, and it's kind of hard to see. I'll kind of turn it at an angle here. There's a flat spot right here, so when the pen is on your desk, it helps keep the pen from rolling around, being completely round. So that's a nice little feature. Cap is on Franklin-Christoph's block threads, which are these big chunky threads. And much like they did with the Model 2, they've moved the threads from, down here where they normally would sit to right at the very edge of the section. So I love this. I think it's brilliant because that way my fingers aren't on threads because I hold my pen a little bit further back. If you're the kind of person who holds your pen right down at the end of the section, that might annoy you a little bit. So just keep that in mind. There is a tiny, tiny little bit of a step down here between the section and the barrel, but it's not too bad. Pen is a cartridge converter filled, uses standard international cartridges and converters, and can and often is adapted as an eyedropper. Now, I don't eyedropper my pens anymore. Unless I have a couple pens that can only be eyedroppered, I will do that. But I'm very careful about where I take them. Basically, eyedroppered pens stay on my desk in my house because I have just had too many problems with eyedroppering my pens, and yes, I use silicone grease. In fact, I eyedroppered this and made the mistake of taking it on a plane with me. My fault, totally my fault, but I did have an ink explosion as a result of that. Interesting note, and I wish I had the cap in here. I couldn't find it before I sat down to do the review. When I had the ink explosion, again, totally my fault, nothing wrong with the pen itself, it's just eyedroppering in airplanes, bad combination. Ink got right on the lip of the cap here, and I could not get it out. And this can be a problem with a very small subset of these antique glass pens. The chemical treatment that they use, or the treatment that they use on the inside of the pen, I don't know for sure that it's a chemical treatment, can cause some kind of micro cracks in the material that, if ink gets into them, can be very, very difficult to get out. I contacted Franklin-Christoph to ask about this. They said a lot of times if you run it through a quick ultrasonic cleaning bath with a little bit of OxyClean, that'll take care of it really, really nicely. I tried that, it didn't work for me, but the nice thing is Franklin-Christoph has some of the best customer service in the industry, and contacted them, and they were happy to replace the cap free of charge. And that's what I spoke with Scott from Franklin-Christoph, and he said, yeah, our policy is if you see that particular problem with your pen, we will replace the part. So that's good to note. Like I said, it happens on only a very small percentage of pens, but it does happen. So if you are one of those people who you expect your demonstrator to be pristine and you're going to eyedropper it, this might not be the right material selection for you. Antique glass is really neat, but you don't necessarily, if you eyedropper it, you do run the risk of either staining the material, or if you got one of those unlucky ones that has those micro cracks, getting some ink stuck in there. So don't want to make a bigger deal out of it than it is, because it's really not that big a deal, and there is a method to resolution, but I do want to bring it up as just something to be aware of. In the hand, this is a tremendously comfortable pen. It's a really, really nice writer. It's, you know, the fact that there are no threads here to get your grip on really makes it nice. Franklin-Christoph has beautifully contoured sections. I find their sections to be consistently very, very comfortable. And this longer pen, normally I would find this to be almost too long, but it's so lightweight, and the fact that you've got a little bit of solid acrylic down here to give it a little bit of extra heft really makes the pen feel comfortable for long writing sessions. This pen also has a nib, an unusual nib on it. I'll talk about that in a second. But depending on how you like to hold your pen, if you're a high angle pen versus a kind of a 45-degree angle writer, which is how I write, you may, this longer pen actually helps me keep the pen at an angle that I get better consistency with this particular nib. And I should mention, the pen does post. It posts, you know, it's just, again, friction fit on the back there, so there's no clicks or threads or anything like that. But it's so long, there's very little likelihood of your hand pushing this off unless you write with the pen up here. It should stay on pretty securely. And it posts pretty deeply, so it only adds about that much to the length of the pen. So one of the things that makes Franklin-Christoph pens unusual is the array of nib options that come with the pen. So they use JoWo nib units in both steel and 14 karat gold. And in addition to the standard sizes like extra fine, fine, medium, broad, they also have special grinds available kind of as stock options. So among those are stub and italic nibs ground by the master of nib grinding, in my opinion, Mike Masayama. So this is one of his. This is the medium italic. I've used both the italics and the stubs. I like them both a lot, and they're really, really nice nibs. In addition to that, they also offer something called a SIG nib, and that stands for Stub Italic Gradient. And so that, depending on the angle at which you hold the pen, it will write more like a stub or write more like an italic, which is kind of cool. Um, and, uh, and you know, generally speaking, they adjust all their nibs before they go out. They know what they're doing. Their nibs are usually very, very nice. And this nib was a little drier than I liked, but I blame myself for that. So I bought this pen at the LA Pen Show with my own funds, and I I knew that I could adjust the nib if I wanted to. The table was backed up. I didn't want to take the time, so I just said, hey, don't worry about it. I can adjust it myself and send it on my way. Had I taken the time to sit down at the table, I absolutely am certain they would have gotten the adjustment the way I wanted it. So that wasn't a big concern. So I have opened up the wetness a little bit on this nib, but just know if you order from them, they will take the time to adjust it and make it kind of the way you'd like it. So being a medium metallic, I do get a slightly broader line than a cross line, but it's a medium. It's not a broad italic, so it's not going to be a huge difference. But that cross line is very, very, very narrow, which you would expect. It is, as a 14 karat gold nib, it does have a little bit of give to it, a little bit of bounce. It's not a lot, and I mean, this is not intended to be a flex nib. You'll notice I did get just a tiny little bit of railroading there. That is something that I get when I try to push some variation out of it, beyond the variation that is ground into the tip. Like I mentioned, it's not the wettest nib in the world, but it's got a decent ink flow. and only the slightest hint of ink starvation that I have seen on long writing sessions. But again, I think that has to do with this converter. I've tried different converters, and the converter that's in here now seems to be a little bit better than the converter I used before. So I don't think it's a problem with the pen. I think it's a problem with the converter. Fortunately, if you're into fountain pens at all, you probably have a bazillion of these floating around anyway. Yeah, the nib is really nice. It is a little sharp, and you probably noticed during the writing sample, gives a little bit more feedback than I generally go for in a nib. But that has a lot to do with my preference for round nibs over stubs and italics. I used to think that, well, you know, I want to use the specialty nibs, and people are getting grinds done, and that's great. And if that's the kind of nib work you like, I'm all for it. But I'm becoming confident enough to know I like round nibs. I like them. The stubs don't do a lot for my handwriting because I'm more of a swoopy cursive kind of guy. I'd rather have a nib that bounces and flexes than a nib that's got a flat point on it. So I love this nib. It writes beautifully. If I had to do it over again, I'd probably get a round nib just because the more I use pens, the more I realize that's just my preference. But yeah, it writes really nicely, and it is a little sensitive to the angle at which I hold the pen. So if I hold it like this, it doesn't write as well as if I hold it like this. So this nib, because of its italicness, is going to be a little bit more sensitive to the way you hold your pen. That's just something to be aware of. For reverse writing, it does write. It is quite scratchy and very dry. Not something I would enjoy writing that way, but you can if you wanted to. And overall, I have been really impressed with this. I've used this pen quite a bit. You know, this is obviously a desk pen. It's long. It's not really meant to be put in your pocket, as I said earlier. And but I still carry it with me to work sometimes in my Notco case. And it fits in the Notco case, and I can carry it. I like it. It's got some visual appeal. Now, so this pen is really, really comfortable in the hand. It writes really well. It's got some very unique visual interest. It's a pen I like a lot. I'm not sure I would say it's one of my favorites of all time, but I like the pen a lot. The form factor is a little unusual, and for someone who generally carries his pens around, it's on the verge of being just too long to be able to do that comfortably. Fortunately, I don't clip pens in my shirt pocket very often or things like that, so it doesn't bother me and I'm still able to carry it around, but it's just barely on the edge of being able to do that. So the Franklin-Christoph Model 66 Stabilis retails for starting at $169.50. This is not, Franklin-Christoph is pretty vertically integrated company. They do most of their own construction and retail. You can buy some of their pens through other retailers, but usually those are special editions and kind of one-offs. If you want their standard production line stuff, you basically have to buy it through them. And you'll know, if you've been to a pen show before where Franklin-Christoph has attended, you'll know people descend on that table like a swarm of locusts first thing in the morning to see the color prototypes and what's available. Now the 66 is available in different materials all the time. This antique glass, though, is only available in short windows. It's not something they have available all the time. Apparently it's a fairly intense process to prepare and finish this pen. And so you want to keep an eye out on their site. A lot of times they will have a sign-up list or a waiting list for it. Or if you can make your way to a pen show, they almost always have antique glass versions of their popular lines at those pen shows. So if you go to the Franklin-Christoph website and try to buy this right now, chances are you won't be able to, but you might be able to sign up for a list to get it when they do another batch of these. Now, I said that they start at $169.50. This pen goes for a little bit more. You can basically add an extra $80 to $100 if you want a gold nib over a steel nib, and add a little extra on top of that if you want one of the custom grinds, which this has. So this retails for $279.50, which I think is a very fair price for a gold nib with a custom grind by Mike Masayama in a very unusual and difficult to treat material. Quality construction, it writes like a dream. So overall, I'm a big fan of this pen, and I think the value is there. If you're finally getting to the point where you're like, I want to look at gold nib pens, I want to look at something that's a little different than the standards that are out there, the Franklin-Christoph 66, I think, is a really, really strong option. All right, well, I think that should do it for this review. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to head over to penhabit.com to check out the other photos, the written review. Look in the Pen Habit store for the currently inked notebook line and any pens that I happen to have for sale over there. And we will see you here next time on the Pen Habit. Thanks so much for watching.